All right. So for this session, we're going to do a bit of a Q&A with two gentlemen who are both very busy, but taking some time out to speak with us today. We have Marcel Becker, Director of Product Management for Yahoo, formerly Verizon, formerly Oath, formerly Yahoo. So we've come full circle. Marcel is in charge of the, I'm going to get this right. He's in charge of the AOL Mail and the Yahoo Mail platform at this point, and maybe the partner sites as well. I'm not, I'd have to double check that one. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, guaranteed.
Yeah, it's pretty much all the consumer mailboxes we host, including the two big consumer products, AOL Mail and Yahoo Mail. And then we actually host email for close to 300 different domains, including some partner domains. And we also host email for our small business product, Yahoo Small Businesses, which is thousands of domains.
Excellent, thank you. And then joining us as well is Alex Brotman. Alex is the Senior Engineer Anti-Abuse and Messaging Policy person for Comcast. So for those of you out there looking at where you send email, I'm assuming you all send a lot of email to these two gentlemen's networks. So Alex, welcome.
Thank you.
I don't know exactly how many networks you cover in regards to Comcast, but you do have a number of other branded networks as well that you participate and manage as well, right?
We do. I mean, it's not just the role of residential email that we serve here. So I also sort of liaise to some of the internal corporate organizations as well, and sort of give them guidance on anti-spam or things like that, or best practices. So it's not just the commercial email or consumer email. So
right. So both of you have a commercial and a consumer email portfolio that you manage. So that's great. So everyone out there, if you have questions you'd like answered, we're happy to take them. I'm gonna jump in. I think if you both were on at least part of the last session, if not the whole last session, there was some great questions about BIMI. And since you've both been involved in BIMI for a long time, I'd rather just like to start right there as a continuation. One of the key questions that people ask me frequently really comes down to that why BIMI, and I know Marcel, you and I've talked about this a lot from the consumer experience point of view, but I'd love just for our audience, if they've not heard you speak on sort of why implement a solution like BIMI on behalf of the consumer, right? What would you tell the audience in regards to go out and do these things?
Sure, and you mentioned it already, right? We really look at the consumer experience first. So maybe let me answer this in two parts, more the official, and then maybe even some behind the scenes, how I got to join the BIMI working group. So it's really when we look at the consumer experience or the user experience in our products, and primarily on the mobile mailbox, our mobile apps, we just asked users and also looked at what they really like, what they didn't like. And one of the primary use cases of using a mobile app to manage your email is triage, is understanding what do I have in my mailbox and who sent it. And visual cues are really important. People like to see avatars. People like to have some visual indication of who actually sent the email. And there has been some study that I think 55% or so of users say from address, a picture and the subject line is basically deciding for them whether they want to open the email or not, or just delete it. So, and when we looked at that study, and when we looked at what our users are telling us, the avatar becomes really important. But when you also factor in that 96% of all email in our users' inboxes is commercial, meaning it's brands sending email to users, like a normal avatar in your traditional contact list, like Matt, you show up obviously when you send me an email, right? And so does Alex. But when you get an email from a brand, what is it? It's not a face, right? So we really wanted to show logos because that makes perfect sense, right? You want to know, okay, Macy's or whatever brand is sending you an email, and we spend so much time and effort on curating these logos, and to me that's just silly. And wind back, I think it was 5 years now or 6 years. I'm losing track of time, really. I was working on a little email application called Alto, and one of the primary use cases was extracting information from email, put it into cards, put it into different views, and you see some of that in Yahoo Mail, our mobile apps. And then also let the users know which brand actually this card is from, right? Is it the flight? Is it from United or Delta or whatever? If it's an offer, if it's a shipment, is it from Amazon? What brand? And I was looking for a reliable source of logos, and there wasn't one. And so what we end up doing, we actually sat down and created these logos by hand, and that was silly as well, right? And then I met a whole bunch of people at various conferences, and we all shared the same pain points and concerns, and there's legal liabilities involved. There's just the sheer human manpower required to do all of that, and everybody was doing it, right? Yahoo was doing it, Microsoft was doing it, Google was doing it. So we are replicating all this work and spending all the time and money, and we thought that is silly. We should just work all together and create a standard, and then work with the sending community and allow them to actually take control of what logo should appear in those mailboxes next to emails or extracted data and all kinds of stuff. So that's how Bimmy was born. And to me, that's still the mission, is allow brands to control the experience. They can tell us what logos they want to see. We have a reliable way of getting these logos from the correct sources, right? And there's all these safety, security things to make sure that only verified brands can publish logos. And I'm pretty sure you heard all about that in the previous session. But yeah, that's why we do it. User experience at the end of the day, and to save a little bit money on our side too.
That's always good as well, right?
Right.
Now, Alex, I know you're also heavily involved in the Dmarc side of things when it comes to implementation, and you don't necessarily have the same user UI like Yahoo would or Gmail would with your infrastructure. But how does Dmarc play into sort of the realm of email from your point of view, not just at Comcast specifically, but in general,
Right.
because I know you're working on expanding and developing the standard for Dmarc. So, talk about how that helps brands and how that helps people understand what's happening with their email.
Sure. I mean, so obviously Dmarc, the foundations of Dmarc are SPF and DKIM, which lead to they're used in message authentication. So where does it come from, and is it cryptographically signed? So with Dmarc, I mean, you're effectively requesting the receiver to say, if the authentication isn't provided properly, then here's what I'd like you to do with these messages. And in the case of popular brands, if your domain is absent a Dmarc policy and enforcing Dmarc policy, then it still allows for an attacker to impersonate your direct domain. I want to make that kind of clear. Your direct domain, and if there is, if they do that, then your customers could be fooled into providing credentials or some other information in the belief that they're providing them to you. So the idea there is really, between, if you can help with the Dmarc policies and things like that, hopefully your customers, I don't know if they feel safer, but because they may not understand what's actually going on behind the scenes, but generally speaking, the ecosystem should be safer. It should be harder to impersonate your brand. If a domain shows up that looks like your domain but with a 0 or a 00 in the case of Yahoo, then it shouldn't have much of a domain reputation, or it should look suspect, and that should help with identification and either deleting the message, reporting it as spam, or never seeing it in the first place, which is really the ideal goal. So
Right. And So there was a conversation I was having last week when it comes to the idea of Dmarc, and some people will publish a domain policy on their organization, others a subdomain policy, and in some cases I've seen companies publish Dmarc policies, maybe a reject policy with no RUA or no RUF tags. Do you see any reason that a brand would say like, I don't want reporting? Uh, or is that something that you would give different advice on?
I look, I can't speak for every company out there. I mean, that's a
Sure.
hard situation to put me in.
As a
But
Dmarc expert.
yeah, I
As a
mean, it
Dmarc
just
expert.
seems like you would want to ingest those reports. It may be overwhelming at first, or maybe you only look at, one every few days or something like that, and that's okay. I mean, but what you're really looking for is, especially if you're not, well, it doesn't matter. If you should be able to take those reports and look at them and say, I understand that somebody who believes they should be sending as me is doing so, and you may find out that there in fact is somebody that you mean to be sending as you. If you only find that people are trying to create fraudulent messages with your domain and they're being stopped, that's fantastic. But if you find out that you forgot that the marketing department is doing XYZ over here, then you may that's a good thing for you to discover as well. So I can't say, obviously, again, it's not a cut and dry experience for everybody, but in almost all situations, you should at least look for some way to ingest that data and create reports out of it so that somebody can say, here's the right or wrong thing that we're seeing. So,
Or maybe they had reporting and now they're really confident that they're doing a good job.
right. I mean, yes, but
I mean,
situations change. Even if you
of
are
course.
today or 6 months ago, you were confident, that doesn't mean that today the situation hasn't
Oh,
changed. So
I
I get
agree.
what you're saying. So,
I agree. On the flip side, I also probably get every other day, we get an email to our Dmarc reporting email address from domain owner, email sender complaining to us or asking us why the heck they receive these Dmarc reports or that Dmarc spam when we should stop doing that. So yeah, if you have a Dmarc company or if you're doing Dmarc consulting, there's still a lot of still a lot to be done there.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly not a simple process, but it can be very effective. I've worked with brands in the past that have gone through the process of implementing Dmarc and seen some great benefits when it comes to stopping phishing, stopping spoofing, um, finding holes in their security, finding holes in their own platforms. And then in the end, actually getting better delivery results after going through the process of implementation. So um, there is a question that came in. It's an easy answer, so I'll just talk about it. But it's yeah, you can absolutely digest reports on your own. There are lots of different scripts out there to read the XML files into databases and build your own reporting tools. There are free tools as well as paid tools. So absolutely, you should be looking at those if you look at implementing that. I think the challenge becomes understanding the data and knowing what to do with it. And I think that's where when you use an external tool, you get an expert to help you understand and digest those. So from the point of view of inbound mail, how important is authentication? In the last session, Dan mentioned that a decision that they are using within their own network is if your authentication fails, even if you're not publishing a Dmarc record, they've decided they're going to use P equals reject on all domains, whether a Dmarc record's present or not. So if your DKIM or SPF both fail, they're going to reject your mail. How important is it as a commercial platform that brands are actually authenticating mail when they're sending emails to you?
um, I can't stress it strongly enough. I think it's pretty important. I mean, you're talking, especially for a brand. I mean, you should be using both SPF and DKIM. If the message is forwarded or mangled or whatever the case may be, yeah, it really you're if you use both of those foundations, it really can help your deliverability. We've seen messages or we've seen brands where they think they're DKIM signing and they're not, or they're broken, or the SPF is just they have two SPF records in their DNS, and it marks them both invalid when that happens, for example. So and I will reach out to ESPs if I know who they are, and I will tell them, hey, your customer has a problem here. Can you work to fix it? So
Yeah, it's really, really important. I mean, it's an important data point for us to understand who's trying to gain access to our users' mailbox, right? And think about it like a club where you're trying to get beyond the bouncer, or even, I don't know, country borders where you have to, showing an ID always helps. Otherwise, the guy who is guarding the entrance, whatever that is, has to go by looks or intuition or whatever, right? And that is never a good or a perfect way of doing things. So showing an ID or showing who you actually are and authenticating your email always helps.
And I think the one piece there, I think, is, as you both mentioned, things change, right? So don't just set it and forget it. Things change. Make sure you're on top of it and keeping track of those things. And things break, right? Things change. We've all seen it, technical debt wise, right? You name it. This is another sort of deliverability myth that I read a lot about. And I think it's an interesting question, and I obviously have sort of mixed feelings on it. But a lot of times you'll see articles, 200 words not to use in your subject lines. When it comes to content like that, free shipping in the subject line, is that as important as domain and IP reputation, or is it something that used to be really important for filtering and has now become sort of a secondary or third layer filtering technology? So not completely useless, but maybe not as important as it used to be. Is it fair to say that?
You hit it on the head. It's a myth. I mean, yes, it was important in the past, as you alluded to, right? When spam really became a problem, spam filters also had to evolve and adapt, and looking for certain phrases was certainly a thing. And that's how I started to protect my own mail server back in the 90s is, you start creating filters and regechecks and stuff like that. But if you, fast forward 25 years, present day, and you're running large scale mailbox, consumer mailbox infrastructure, which is supporting multiple languages, different use cases on that email infrastructure, that is less and less important. So what is really important is who's sending the email. So that goes back to context, goes back to authentication. And to whom is that email sent to? And then how are these users, these recipients, interacting with that piece of email, right? So engagement is important. Your reputation is important. What people do with that email, the context of that email is important. Like, is this kind of a shopping email? So we do categorize email. Is this a transactional email? Is this a notification? Is this like a flight, right? To really see why was that email sent? What is the intent by the sender, and what are our users going to do with that, and what are our users actually doing with it at the end? So these are all signals we use. What you actually put in there as a content-wise is almost irrelevant. With that one exception is we do look at URLs, we do look at attachments, and we do look at signals like that. But from what you put in the subject line and whether you use emojis or not important.
Okay, that's great. I love hearing that, and it's one of those myths that I've been trying to stomp out for a long time as well. So, I certainly think people get stuck on these, easy things like don't use free in the subject line. I always look at my own email and say, I don't know, I got 25 emails this month that say free shipping in the subject line.
And
they all deliver.
It also creates a problem on the flip side, right? So we have a lot of complaints from users or experts in the industry too, saying, hey, I got this fish email, and it's so obviously fish. Right? Like, just look at the words, like, look at what they're asking you. And like, yes, a human being looking at that email will always say, this is fraud, this is fish, right? But a machine looking at that, it's harder, especially when you talk about fish, which is targeted, which is very low volume. The less data you have, the harder it is for a machine to really understand what's in there, and especially when it's language agnostic. And of course, anti-phish filters work differently than anti-spam, but I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Sure. Alex, you look like you had something you wanted to add there for a second.
No, I mean, I don't, I mean, Marcel's really correct. I mean, there's no hard and fast set of terms that are going to keep you out of the inbox. And, these things have evolved over time. He's right. That's, it's, when you're looking at a phishing message, is the other thing you have to remember is the computers that make these decisions do it in milliseconds, as opposed to you sitting there and looking at it for a few minutes and trying to figure it out. So, there's a whole bunch of different aspects of that. So.
Okay. There's a question here. I think this is an interesting one because, my general opinion is always, it's not about the content, it's more about the permission and the engagement. But the question here from the audience is, how impactful, and I'm assuming content, because it just says, how impactful can that be on the industry that is sending email, for example, gambling? So do filters, look at industry specific things, or are they looking in general more so? Again, I understand you're not going to give away a secret sauce. So just, in general, like, is it more problematic for maybe adult content or gaming content in general? And is that due to any specific thing that you might know, like more bad actors in the space or things like that?
I mean, I think it's probably more related to the gray market email that is probably in some of those industries, and I hate to say it like that, but I mean, if you look at what comes through as spam or phishing, sometimes it might, the example was gambling. There's going to be like, hey, like, you can win $1,000 today if you just go to this website and put in your credit card number. Sure, fine. That may or may not be true, but that doesn't mean that it's not, there may be some gray mail associated with that. And that's, I hate to say it. The other thing is, there's, I hate to say there are forceful marketers, but there are really folks who, and I don't know if this is really specific to an industry, but there are, industries out there that, or seemingly, that really sort of overload my own personal inbox with messages all the time. And so that may lead to frustration and consumers marking those messages as spam or not even reading them at all. So
It's almost a associated industry issue where some people, like you said, in that gray mail space, could be tainting the filters against an industry. Even, and I guess I would say even makes authentication not much more important, right? If you want to stand out from that crowd, you need to make sure you're doing things above and beyond. And like I said, for me, I've always been content agnostic. It's never been, you can't send this content. It's always, if you're going to send this content, be better than everyone else.
Right. Like, if you're sending from a shared IP address, that may impact you. There's a whole bunch of things that go into reputation. If you have the ability to make everything your own, that's great. If you don't, then you may get lumped in with somebody else who's questionable. So.
Yeah. To what Alex said, I mean, again, the content is not really important, and we have a lot of users, they like to receive emails, in various categories, right? Be it gambling or whatever that might be, and that's fine, right? We have an obligation to deliver that email and respect what they want. But as you said, some players in the industry or some certain industry verticals have a tendency to behave equally bad. And that just might create a problem for, the few good guys in that industry who are trying to get through,
right,
and be heard.
Absolutely. And I think that's always, like I said, the message is be better than those that you're trying to compete against. So, especially for those types of people's attention. So when it comes to, another problem that I see people faced with a lot is message throttling, and sort of those types of rate limits. When you hear complaints from brands or maybe from ESPs, is there something that they should be looking at internally before reaching out to say, I could have fixed this on my own, or things like that you would advise them to look at first maybe before asking for help?
Yeah, look at your own numbers and stats, right? Or ask your ESP if you're working with an ESP if anything is out of bound. Sometimes we get senders and they were perfectly fine, and then we start throttling them, and they get our TSO4 errors, and then they immediately reach out through various channels and say, "Please unblock us." And often, when our postmaster team works with them, then it's either they had been compromised, if they were hosting various players, or they were using an infrastructure which has been compromised, right? This goes back to please authenticate your email if you're using shared IPs and things like that. Or one of the marketing teams just decided to significantly increase volume, and nobody knew about it, or they knew but they didn't put one and one together. So look at your own signals. If you have feedback loops from us, look at that. That might be an indication. If you get more feedback in there, maybe your content was not very well liked. Look at what you actually sent recently versus maybe a week before to see if a spike might have contributed to that. And then look around you. If you're in a shared environment, maybe it's not you, but it's somebody else who took you down with them.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go. I was going to
I really
change.
have anything to add. I mean, Marcel pretty much summarized it perfectly. So
I was going to change gears a little bit.
go ahead.
So I know both your organizations have robust postmaster pages, and sort of information for senders and ESPs. Is that also a good resource that, like, as a brand marketer, people should be looking for and reading up on? I know that there's a lot of technical information in there that maybe is more ESP focused, but the advice given to consumers, or not consumers, I guess, brand marketers, do you think there's relevant stuff there that they should be focused on looking at? And maybe they're not reading the same bounce codes, but there's things there that they should be paying attention to.
I mean, I can't speak for Yahoo's postmaster pages, obviously, but I mean, for ours, there's some information there that could be helpful, especially, if you're facing throttling, if you're trying to warm up an IP address or domain or whatever it may be, there's some stuff out there that can help. And I guess that sort of answers your question. So
Would you say it's fair to, it's more ESP focused though, or other network focused as opposed to brand focused?
it depends on how involved the brand is with the ESP, and if the ESP is really just like, just give us your list and give us your content and we'll take care of it all for you, or if the brand is really, we'd like to send to this group first and that group first, and we're going to change the content as we go and that sort of thing. I think it really depends on how involved they are, and that's that's sort of obviously up to the brand. But yes, it's more meant for the folks who are operating the mail systems, or preparing the campaigns, I guess I should say. So
I agree. I mean, that's really the target audience, right? I always talk about it like our consumer help pages are for consumers, and the postmaster side is the help page for email senders, like the guys actually sending the email. Others can obviously get some information and insight from those pages, but that's the target audience. It's the senders, the actual email senders. And even there, I think we need to improve, because like we often get people, they find some email address on the blog and then ask us, why are we blocking them, when right there in the SMTP error message is an URL they can click, and it tells them right then and there why and where they should go to contact us for help. But human beings.
Lazy web. And I would actually say both of your organizations are both very friendly when reaching out for help, and provide a lot of help compared to other mailbox providers when it comes to trying to understand what problems are and what brands are facing. And I would say anyone who has reached out to your teams probably experienced something very similar, to get lots of help. Your teams have been extremely helpful over the years when I've been working with them, but also I hear lots of compliments from the industry, people working with your teams as well. So kudos to both of you for that, for putting that type of environment together. I guess we only have a couple minutes left, so I just wanted to give you both an opportunity here. If there's advice that you'd like to give the audience around email in general, or Marcel, I know we've talked a lot about AMP in the past and schema, getting people interested in those types of things. Any sort of general comments around, go forth and try these things, or do things this way that you'd want to share to
Yeah,
the audience?
it's the usual. Don't treat email like print, right? Don't just say, I print the same flyer, create the same content for everybody, and then just throw it over the fence, i.e. to us, and then I'm done with it, right? Yes, that's cheap and maybe you get some results, but respect our users' wishes and really embrace uh, user experience and what these users actually will see about your brand, right? Leverage the tools which are now available, right? It's not the 90s anymore. There's so much more you can do. Send less, send more relevant things. Use AMP, use BIMI, use schema, all of these things to stand out, to create a better user experience, send more relevant emails to our mutual customers.
Yeah, compelling emails is really, I've really harp on the inbox fatigue thing, and I filter away a lot of I hate to say promotional mail, but that stuff, and the stuff that still gets to my inbox it's a lot. And it's, I feel bad for folks who have been using the same email address for a long time and have really shared it with a lot of different websites. I mean, there's a, there are I get emails sometimes twice a day from the same brand. But the other thing, and I don't, we get asked this from time to time. Segregating your email is something that I feel like is not always well understood, and it really can help. So if you have your promotional, your transactional, and doing it both by IP and domain, if you have that ability, can help, and it helps. It helps isolate issues when you have them. You can say, I have an issue just with my transactional, or just with my promotional, whatever the case may be, and it can really help sort of track down those issues. So
Okay. Yeah, I like that advice too. Multiple segregation of email channel or email message type. Is there a point though when it becomes too finite? Like Marcel, I know you and I've talked about this before. When people get almost too finite with the number of domains they're using, it makes it a bit more challenging for some of the reputation platforms maybe to
Because
roll
it
them
goes
out.
back to authentication, right? So we need to be able to identify like who are you, and is this the same guy who's trying to send an email? And if you're using a lot of custom domains, we're trying to be smart about this to see whether brand-email.com is the same as brand.com or brand-email-us.com. But or don't try to be too smart about it or too creative, right? Ideally, use one domain, clearly identifying your brand. Use subdomains maybe for various use cases, as Alex was saying, but that's about it.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if you're going to use a subdomain and only send once every 5 years, that may not be beneficial. But yeah,
Okay. I sent this question yesterday in a discussion forum. So it's a company that has lots of geographically separate websites. So maybe like a .com, a .ca, a .eu, a .es variations. Their actual question, and it was a good one, I was kind of stumped, was do we send everything from the .com to everybody? Do we separate it out by the geographical regions? So the .ca sends to one brand, the .com to another, or should they create like .ca brand.com, .es.brand.com subdomain? What would you recommend in a situation like that where you may have a diversified web presence?
Look at the volume. Like if each domain basically has a lot of volume, like in each these countries, that's probably okay. If you only have very small numbers of volume for each of these domains or for some of them, then it's very hard to build up reputation for each of these domains because again, we need volume, we need data, we need to see engagement to build up and create reputation for these domains. Yeah, that's the short answer. It's like if we don't send a lot of email, further segregating that or spreading this on different domains, not a good idea. If you send a lot of emails, probably a better idea.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence with the advice that I wanted to give back to the person in regards to, it sort of fits both ways. Subdomain off the geographical domain may make sense, or use the geographical region as the subdomain off the .com may make sense. I don't know if there was a right or wrong answer with that. So it was one of those, it's like you said, it's a very interesting, you need enough signal, if you will, to make things happen for reputation wise. So thank you both for joining us and participating at the Canadian Email Summit. I always enjoy talking with both of you. And I'd love if you would stick around for the rest of the day, but I realize you're both busy. So if you're got other things to do, appreciate your time as always. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good day.
All right.
Bye.